I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host and the most prominent political commentator in Lions Bay, BC. Welcome back to the show, Rafe.
Always a pleasure, Jim.
What about the optics of Premier Christy Clark's visit to Asia, where she's taken along some real estate companies?
How long are we going to put up with this crap? I mean, it's unbelievable. It really and truly is. Why she would be taking real estate people there in order to assist British Columbia in the state the real estate market is in now, I really honestly don't know. People want to see her cleaning up the situation here, not going and promoting more of it out of Asia. But quite apart from that, the original stated aims, as you know, were LNG and energy, etc. I mean, really and truly, Jim, does she really think the people are fooled? I mean, this is so bizarre that even old Rafe is speechless. I cannot believe another junket to Asia to sell LNG when nobody wants to buy it.
Well, also, too, we're told the real estate agents aren't for residential realty. They're representing commercial real estate. But in Vancouver, we have seen how commercial real estate can quickly be zoned residential.
Well, I just, frankly, Jim, the whole, it just buffaloes me that she gets away with this. And I have to admit this almost every time we talk. I come from a different era and a different kind of government, and the premier I worked under wouldn't have tolerated this sort of nonsense for 10 seconds. I just don't understand this at all. She is obviously owned by the real estate, the large real estate developers. Matter of fact, there was a little Twitter the other day that talked about Bob Rennie and all the money he had, and I showed a picture of him with Christy Clark, and my comment was, if a person makes all that money, why can't they spend it on what they want, like politicians? And it's become absolutely bizarre. And I hate to use the C word, but it's almost beginning to look like corruption in this whole issue. I mean, nobody wants our LNG. We're running off and talking to everybody about LNG. We've got enough problems in real estate on our own without going out and buying more. Away we go. Away goes Christy Clark. Always seems to go to India, and she seems to like India. I mean, it's just beyond belief how much money that woman is spending on absolutely useless ventures.
Right, and she also got an honorary doctorate from some university in Asia. Has she earned a doctorate in anything?
Well, I don't know. I got to be careful here because I got an honorary degree from Simon Fraser. I'm an LLD. Call me doctor, please. But those things are not terribly hard for premiers to come by if they want to kiss enough backsides or just a few right backsides. It doesn't impress me at all. Jim, I'm telling you, I'm speechless. The whole thing is so bizarre. We got so many things we've got to do here in British Columbia, get cleaned up, that need executive action and need it quickly. And we've got a premier flying all over the bloody world, selling things that nobody wants to buy, and she hasn't even got to sell yet. So it's just, as I say, it's beyond belief that your tax dollars and my tax dollars are being paid for that.
Are we seeing the arrogance that happens when somebody's been in power a long time? I'm seeing tweets, maybe they're from twits, but tweets from reporters complaining that Christy Clark no longer answers questions. She just laughs at them and then walks away.
Well, this is the whole secret, I guess. She never has answered questions in the House. I take the time to read Hansard quite a bit, and yes, she makes words, she says things, but she never ever answers any questions directly, and that's just part and parcel of it all. It's an arrogance. I'm surprised it set in this quickly. It usually takes about 8 or 10 years, and she's had about 5. But I mean, it's an absolutely unbelievable arrogance. Let me just give you one quick example, Jim, and I know people maybe don't think about this too much. Bill Bennett, I'm not talking about the real Bill, Bill Bennett, the mines minister, has committed enough ministerial sins to have been fired, had to resign, etc., half a dozen times over in any other government of any repute in the past. He has violated every imaginable parliamentary, what's the word I'm looking for, tradition. Christy Clark has never done any more except stand up and defend him left, right, and center all over the place. Now, that's not what premiers are supposed to do. Premiers are supposed to run a tight ship. They're supposed to have ministers that behave themselves, and they're supposed to discipline ministers that don't, and they're supposed to call upon them to go if they don't. And I just contrast this, if I may, very quickly with the story of Jack Davis back in 1975. His only sin really is not very big when you think about it. He's entitled to first-class tickets to go to Toronto. He takes them and cashes them in and pockets the difference and flies economy. And, it's not the world's biggest deal. When the Attorney General came to Bill Bennett and said that this had happened, he called Davis up, insisted he resign. Davis said, "No, I won't resign. I'm innocent until I prove guilty." He said, "Not when it comes to morality. You're not Davis. You're out of here." And walked into the legislature and resigned him. And the whole thing didn't take 60 seconds. Now, that kind of stuff kept everybody on the straight and narrow. It wasn't cruel. We all knew the rules by which we lived, but we also knew that we had to live by those rules, and the public had to see us live by those rules. And once you don't do that, your whole government loses the confidence of the people in that government, and that's what's happened to Christy Clark. And she deserves every bit of it. She herself has committed enough sins to have to resign, but she never has. And very quickly, I think it started when Gordon Campbell got nailed for drunk driving and went to jail, and he didn't have to pay a penalty. So this is, I think, the basic problem of the government now. It's a complete lack of moral fiber. You want to fly to India for the third time in a year or 2 years? Well, fly away. It's not your money. This whole attitude has pervaded this government, and they're suffering for it, but moreover, we the taxpayers are suffering for it.
Well, since she became premier and lives in Kelowna, the Coquihalla Highway now has a 120-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. And last long weekend and this weekend with bad weather, it was scattered with accidents that the cops all blamed on speed. Is it because she doesn't want to get speeding tickets anymore going home?
I really don't know. I just don't know. Now, don't misunderstand me, Jim. Everybody makes mistakes, and we all did when we were in government, and some of them we knew better, etc. But in days gone by, you paid for the mistakes, and that was the whole difference. And so when you looked at yourself and thought, well, I think I'd like to go 150 kilometers on a 120-kilometer zone, you start to think, wait a minute. If I get nailed doing that, I'm in the premier's office. The next thing I know, I'm down the road. So you don't do it. And the same thing with other things that happen in your office. If you're the Minister of Mines and you have a mining ministry that's just an absolute, total, utter mess, you look at it and say, wait a minute. If I don't clean that up and make it into a proper mining thing, I'm going to have to resign because that's my only duty as minister is to make the ministry work. That doesn't happen anymore. And when that doesn't happen, it seeps through the entire government, down into the upper bureaucracy. The discipline is gone. When the discipline is gone, so is good administration and good government. And that's precisely what's happened to this government.
I wonder if she's keeping her emails now, ever since the Freedom of Information Commissioner chewed her out for not keeping them.
Well, I don't know. I also wonder whether De Jong has learned how to email yet. This is the kind of thing, Jim, that it's bizarre. People are supposed to have some respect for their political leaders, even though they badmouth them as we all do and always have. Deep down, we're supposed to think, those are good, solid people trying to do their best. I'm going to kick hell over them when they don't, but still, I know their heart's in the right place. when you take a look at your government, and you say to yourself, wait a minute, I don't believe that. I don't think that those people's heart is in the right place. I don't think that they've got the integrity and the honesty that I have come to expect from governments, even the ones I hate, even the ones that I detest. I've never doubted that they were trying to do their best, even though I thought they were making horses' asses of themselves. They were trying. Now we see a government that really doesn't care. And when the government doesn't care, and you know it doesn't care, and you lose respect for it, then the government really loses its moral ability to govern. And I know that sounds strong, but you just go back over this entire government's history, and you'll see that I'm right. It's right from pillar to post, from the beginning to end. This government has done things that are just not proper. I've just been writing an article, as a matter of fact, on the IPP situation. You know what I mean? The rivers that the private power were given to make power on by Campbell, and they destroyed the rivers, and they overcharged the BC Hydro by a sweetheart deal, and Hydro has to take all the. I looked at that whole thing, and I thought, Rafe, be fair here. There must be something about this that made some good, honest sense. There wasn't. It was a straight payoff to supporters of the Liberal Party, not once, not twice, but 3 times over. Now, you can do that once, Jim, and people will sort of not notice, or twice, or 3 times, or 4 times. But you can't do it on a daily basis in virtually every ministry without the people saying, I'm fed up with it. I just don't need it. Now, whether or not that plays out in the election, I suppose remains to be seen, because you have to have somebody to take over, and if there's no government in waiting, then maybe Clark can get away with it. But basically, I think that if you look at the Clark government, it is a total lack of the basic morality that you and I and everybody else have come to expect from government. As I say, even governments we don't like.
Well, when you said there's no government in waiting, I know that John Horgan is the leader of the NDP, but honest to God, I don't think I could pick him out of a crowd.
Well, I'm hopeful that he's going to get better. And I say that I'm no NDP supporter. I fought against them in elections. I've come to support them now only because I can't support the Liberals. But I'm beginning to hope that he's going to get his act together. John's problem, I think, is he never really understood properly the role of the opposition, what it's supposed to do, its role as a government in waiting, its role as a constant critic of the government to keep their feet to the fire. Even on things that you might think are okay, you still hold their feet. He never really has grasped that. I see some signs now that he's beginning to understand that's what he has to do, because here's kind of the tricky point, Jim. You cannot look like a government in waiting unless you are a good-looking opposition. In other words, the people say, look, I don't know whether he was right to oppose Minister Mair on that thing, but he opposed him, damn it. And I watched him in the House, and he gave Mair hell. And it was the kind of thing I want my MLA to do, right or wrong. I want him to hold the government's feet to the fire. And if you don't see the opposition doing that, then you don't have the confidence that they're going to be able to actually govern. Now, I hope that Horgan has started to see that. He is speaking out more, he is grasping issues better, and I hope that he does that. But if he doesn't look like a government in waiting, then of course there will be the same old government we've had.
Well, look at how effective Jenny Kwan and Joyce McPhail were as the lone 2 NDP members in the House.
Well, that of course is an excellent point, and they really were the ones that paved the way for the NDP comeback, and it's because of the way that they opposed and the way the opposition went. And you have to have that. It's now you're all in British Columbia. It's a little strange in this sense. From the beginning of time, certainly for as long as I can remember, the right has done a fantastic job of demonizing first the CCF and then the NDP. And even when they're in power and they have bad government, it's never quite as bad as the right wing is able to portray it and get people to accept. I think that's changing a little bit now, but that's one of the problems the NDP has to start with, is that the public don't really trust them all that much. But having said that, you have to gain that trust. There's only one way to do it. You can't pretend that you can reinvent the wheel, because parliamentary politics has been going on for 1,000 years, and those kind of things, those are immutable, unchangeable maxims. And if you don't know how to be a leader of the opposition, if you don't know how to look like the leader of the opposition, if you don't know how to raise hell, as those two ladies did, women, I'm sorry, that you just mentioned, then you're not going to get the public to see you as the kind of leader they want. And that's important because even in a parliamentary system, we tend to see leaders rather than the mass of the party. I know it's not supposed to be that way, but that's the way it turns out to be. And it's Trudeau against Harper. It's not your MP against somebody's MP in Nova Scotia. So it's very, very important for the leader to look like they can lead. And this is what Horgan has got to do. He's got to overcome a lot of lost time.
And if you think it's impossible for the NDP to win in BC, take a look at next door, where the NDP upset nearly 50 years of Conservative rule.
Well, that's right, and the government there it fell into the usual stuff that long-term governments do. It seems to be something you just can't help, and they were in for so long. But even once you're in more than about 10 years or so, no matter how hard you try, some rot sets in, laziness sets in, arrogance sets in, etc. Now, the only reason that the government goes from 10 to 14 to 16 to 20 years is because the opposition has never been able to take advantage of that and show to the public that they can take over and do a better job. So if in this case you have the Clark government looking rotten, as I think they do now, and Mr. Horgan doesn't look better, then of course it's even Steven. And that's the whole point. It's in Manitoba, in Alberta, along came a leader that looked like she knew what the hell she was doing, and she did. Has a lot of political savvy. Knew what the issues were, knew what was bothering Albertans. She also knew that the great myths were gone, that Albertans weren't all hard right-wingers anymore, that didn't give a damn about the environment and so on. She sensed what the voter was. She presented herself and her party as somebody that could take over from these lazy buggers that have been there so long, and she did. And this is the chore that Horgan has. It's not so much selling the fact that the government may not be good. It's selling the fact that they are ready, willing, able to take over that government and do a good job. And that's what his task is, and he's got less than a year to do it.
We'll have more with Rafe Mair right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Rafe Mair. Rafe, former television reporter Harvey Oberfeld has done an excellent blog on what he calls the new deterioration of downtown Vancouver on Granville Mall. He says it's become as bad as it was at Main and Hastings in the core of BC's biggest city, and he's worried that perhaps city government policies are doing it. Is there anything the city can really do?
I'm not sure about that, Harvey. You know, I love Vancouver. I was born in Vancouver, raised in Vancouver. I've been a British Columbian all my life, and I just feel sick when I hear things like what Harvey is saying. And I know Harvey very well, and he's a very, very good reporter. And I'm sick to hear that. I don't know what you can do. Cities all over the world have tried to do things when this happens, but what surprises me here is that it's not in the same old part of town it's always been, so that the city government can say, well, we've tried downtown East Side, we've put money in here, we've done that, done the other. This is a part of town that when I was a boy was the center of town. It was where everybody went. It was what you were proud of. It was where the theaters were, where the stores were, where the lights were, etc. You know, this is a place that was Vancouver. You took people to it. To think that the rot, if I may use that word, has spread into that area, and I've not been there. I'm not well enough to get downtown anymore, Jim, but I've not been there to see that. But if that's what Harvey says, I believe him. If it's got to there, it is a very, very sad situation indeed, and I think that the mayor and the council have got a great deal to answer for. Now, can they do something? Well, I don't know. People like me always say, yes, do something. And you say the same thing. Come on, get on with it, do something. But I'm not so sure that either of us can tell them what exactly they do. But it's an awful thing to think of Vancouver, of all places, having the center part, the place you walk down towards the mountains, to have that turn out badly like that, and unsafe and so on, is an awfully sad thing to contemplate.
I know a lot of people said when they created Granville Mall, a pedestrian mall, and removed cars from it, that would see the deterioration of the place, because then you have people just, plopped there and not moving on.
Well, this was what everybody that didn't want it told Art Phillips way back, and I guess it was in the 60s when this all got started, and I don't quite frankly remember what I thought about that. That was a long time ago, and I probably was living in Kamloops by that time. But in any event, that certainly was what people said. You do that, and you're going to have an awful lot of problems down the way. And I guess they knew what they were talking about.
If you were mayor of Vancouver, could you create any solutions to it? I mean, the homeless crisis started in the early 90s when Jean Chrétien removed federal funding for social housing.
Well, it started even before that. It started back in the 70s when it was decided to release all mentally ill patients from institutions and that sort of thing. And it's gradually grown and added different groups of people to it until it's got to the point now where it's epidemic. It would be cheeky of me to say, yes, I have a solution. All I've got to say is this: you have to find a solution. You've got to find homes. You've got to find ways to look after people. You've got to find ways to tend to the mentally ill in such a way that they're not on the streets and that this is cleaned up. It's not a Vancouver problem. You go to Washington, D.C. or Toronto or anywhere else in the world, you see it. But that doesn't excuse us. We have to do something, and we have to do something quickly. And I suspect that one of the reasons is we've never really been able to get all three branches of senior government to pull together at the same time and all pull on the same oar on this one. That may be the problem. I'm sure that's what Mr. Robertson would probably say. But it's an awful thought for an old man like me to think my Vancouver's got to that. I mean, Vancouver to me is, apart from my wife, the love of my life, and I just can't stand thinking of it this way.
Right, you might argue, but at least you're still in the same house at the end of the day.
Well, that's right. That's right.
And of course, when you look at three different, we have a BC Liberal provincial government, but they're really not Liberals, are they?
Well, I think that you hit on one of the problems, and this is an unkind thing to say, and I've been saying a lot of unkind things about this government, but they're composed largely of people who really deep down don't care, and they don't care because they honestly believe if these people would pull up their socks, etc., 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 then all would be well. And in a book I wrote recently, I talked about a man I met on a cruise years ago who had grown up in he had their equivalent of the East End, and grown up in the ghetto, an American city, etc. And his father had died, and he was left to bring up his sisters when he was only all that 14, that sort of stuff. He went out into the big world. He got into real estate, started flip houses, made himself millions and millions of dollars. And he now looks at people in the inner city where he was born and says, why can't they do like I did? Just make themselves into millionaires or multimillionaires and get out of my wallet, get off my back. And that's what happens to a lot of people, because they have not, either they have been lucky enough to get out on their own and hardworking enough to get out on their own, or they never were there in the first place. They have no real feeling or understanding for those people who are in that position, and they honestly somehow think that the person who's been mentally ill, has had problems, all the things that we've been looking at, can somehow just pull up their bootstraps and everything will be all right. And very quickly, there's one thing I should add to that. There are some people in this world born so that they're not really able to do that. I mean, not everybody is born with the talents to do the kind of things that make a lot of money. There are some people just don't have, and those are the kind of people society has a strong obligation. That's what society is all about, to look after people like that and make sure they've got homes and they've got food and they've got clothing and that sort of thing. And I think the people that make up the present right wing in this country are uncaring about that. They honestly believe that if these people just were like they were, everything would be fine. And I think that underlies a lot of the problems that we're facing today. There's a lack of will in addition to a lack of understanding of how to do something.
Did the Conservative Party really hurt themselves federally when they stripped the word progressive conservative from their name?
Well, I think they probably did, but you know, that's a good idea, a good thought, Jim, because it's not exactly poverty or anything. But when they got into the niqab issue, all of a sudden it exposed the people I've been talking about. The people that they're different, and if they were just like we were, everything would be fine. And they're not, and there would be no violence in the Middle East if the people didn't wear niqabs in downtown Toronto. That sort of thought process works, and it's the same with poverty and so on. If these people would just think right, then everything would be okay. That's not human nature. It's not possible with a lot of people. A lot of people are too far down to get from the very get-go. And quite frankly, that's not the way a decent society works. We try to look after each other, recognizing that we're going to be looking after a lot of people who physically appear as if they could work, that can't work or don't work. That's what the society's about. And it's not as if the people that are in government and in the right wing are starving to death because of this. They just don't like to give anything to anybody that they didn't get themselves. And it's a sad dog in the manger attitude, and we're paying for it.
What about the leader of the Wild Rose Party in Alberta is mean-mouthing the Premier of Ontario when she visited the Alberta legislature?
Well, that's just plain rudeness. And it isn't just the Wild Rose Party is the latest example. You may remember when Senator Robinson and others barracked President Reagan when he visited the House of Parliament. I had no more time for Reagan than they did, but he's the President of the United States. He's entitled to be treated politely, decently, etc. That was just plain and simple bad manners, and it's disgraceful.
Well, having been born in Calgary and raised in Peace River, Alberta, politeness was a way of life, and as a former Albertan, I'm embarrassed that somebody would be treated poorly in Alberta. Where by the way, kids still call you sir and open doors for you. Blows me away.
Yeah, well, it's sad to see, and there's another little example of this sort of breakdown. Our hero, the Sergeant at Arms, Vickers, is that his name?
Yes.
Who he's the ambassador to Ireland, bounces off the stage to throw out a protester from a memorial meeting for British soldiers that died in the rebellion of 1916. And people are saying, "Oh, what's wonderful! Yeah, that's our boy." It's not our boy at all. That's disgraceful. The Irish have spent centuries to get the right and the ability to protest. There was nobody going to lay a finger on this guy if he wanted to protest. That's what 2,000 years of fighting by the Irish has attained for them the right to do that. This guy bounces off a diplomat and our ambassador and starts to wrestle with a man and throw him out. Now, I'm not going to pillory the guy. I mean, it's not the end of the world. But when people, it's not him so much. It's when people look at that and say, it's kind of funny or it's okay, it's whatever. We have lost our perspective in some of those things. That's not the dignity with which an ambassador from Canada is ever supposed to display anywhere under any circumstances. And it's just too bad we don't start to shake our head and start to think about these things.
I think they gave him the post ambassador to Ireland. What kind of trouble can you get into in Ireland where everybody's so friendly?
Well, that's true, but this is getting a little complicated. I've spent an awful lot of time doing Irish history. I became enthralled when I first went there back in 1964, and I know Irish blood in me, I might say, and I couldn't shake Ireland, and I never have been able to. And I read, and I'll tell you, it is very, very complicated. And when you hear people nowadays saying, well, yeah, it's just the Catholics and the Protestants, they tend to overlook the fact that Tone, Emmett, Parnell, Griffiths, Pierce, these men were all Protestants that fought for the freedom of Ireland. So it is not a Catholic Protestant thing at all. It goes much, much deeper, has many, many roots. Now, they have come together in Dublin, of all places, to allow British soldiers or their families to mourn the 1916 deaths. That shows the maturity that Ireland has come to. That shows the support they give to complete freedom of action. And this particular guy that was protesting was just doing exactly that sort of thing. Along comes a Canadian turkey and decides to impose his own standards on this, and without understanding or knowing anything about the Irish situation. And I'm just sad. I'm not mad at our guy Vickers or whatever his name is. I'm just sad that Canadians sometimes go along with whatever the easiest explanation is. Oh, this is just Catholics and Protestants, and doesn't really look at the history of other places and try to understand the depth of the despair that they've gone through and how far they've come to make it a united and a happier country. And it's just saddens me, that's all.
If Vickers was still the sergeant at arms in Parliament, would Elbowgate have ever happened?
He might have thrown Trudeau out in his Pratt. That would be interesting. Never thought of that.
Rafe, thank you very much for chatting with us.
Always a pleasure, Jim. Thank you for having me.
My guest has been Rafe Mair, former BC cabinet minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. You're listening to The Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments or questions for the show can be emailed to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.